So the 2023 Hall of Fame induction list is out, and Rod Brind'amour is not on it again, and I think it warrants a little bit of a discussion. Now, the video that I'm making that is going to be, by my estimate, about an hour and 15 minutes worth of content, so it'll probably be a series of videos as opposed to just one long video, but this is not coming out for a long time. It'll be at least around this time next year, and I'm hoping that I can change the ending from why is Rod Brind'amour not in the Hockey Hall of Fame to what took so long for Rod Brind'amour to get in the Hockey Hall of Fame. The criteria that I have for that video right now, 3 players who are in the Hall of Fame who have better overall point totals, goals, assists than Brind'amour, and 3 that have less than him. These 3 players also have about the same amount of games played. I also made sure to get players that played at about the same time. Additionally, that criteria could go up or down as far as how many players I use. I could use as many as 5 on each end, or I could go down to as little as 2 on each end. I'm not entirely sure exactly how I'm going to go about it when it's all said and done. And I have a lot of the data that I'm using to justify the argument that I have as to why Rod Brind'amour should be in there, a lot of the comparable players that are in there. Before I go spouting off names and statistics and numbers and everything, I'm making sure I'm 110% right and that my argument is as airtight as possible. Here's some things I can definitively say, though, like beyond a shadow of a doubt. At this point, Rod Brind'amour has contributed to more people being in the Hockey Hall of Fame than he has contributed to being in there himself. And that's not to say that he doesn't deserve it. That's not a knock on him at all. But we have to take a look at something here. Ron Francis had a Hall of Fame career, but nonetheless, he did contribute to Ron Francis's point totals just in his time alone as a Hurricane. And Peter Kramanos, the former owner of the Hurricanes, who thankfully is no longer the owner of the Hurricanes, is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And this was a guy that people were yelling and crowing and hating on for years for moving the team from Hartford, and he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Jim Rutherford, the GM who helped the Hurricanes get the cup, but then tried to milk that team for way more than what it was worth, his actions were the biggest contribution as to why the Hurricanes missed the playoffs for 9 years. But he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So he made his contributions to the game. He's in there. So, just for the record, the commonality that those guys have there, because you have an owner, a player, and a GM, each of them have to contribute part of their success, at least part of it, if not a large part of it, to Brind'amour. So, this video isn't going to be strictly talking about the basic reasons why I think Brind'amour should be in there. I have some questions about the criteria. And the whole reason that I got to thinking about, okay, what he does as a coach will put him over the top as a player, was a short that I saw where Paul Bisnett and Ryan Whitney are talking about it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But it also got me thinking something else. Maybe it's time for this criteria to change. So let's consider this. And I actually didn't know this until I heard Trip Tracy say it on a broadcast one night. What Brind'amour does as a coach will have absolutely no bearing if he gets into the Hockey Hall of Fame as a player. If someone makes significant contributions to the game on many different fronts, in the case of Brind'amour, he had his great contributions as a player, and now he's having his great contributions as a coach. I don't understand why those two things cannot be put together. I'm not saying that let's put every single player that ever coached into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I'm not saying let's put every really good coach in there, even though they were a substandard player. I feel like Brind'amour is a different case. And this isn't just for player-coach things. Let's say someone's a really good player and they have like a 900-point career and 1,300 games played, something along those lines. Let's say they have a career with the totals of Justin Williams, for an example. And let's say one day down the line, Justin Williams just skips going behind the bench, and he goes to the front office, and next thing we know, he's the general manager of the Canes. Why can those things not be concurrent with each other? Why can that criteria not be combined to say, okay, this individual has contributed to the game as a player, as a coach, as a general manager, all three, whatever, just giving an example here, okay, he deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's earned it on many different fronts. Now, the times that I've had discussions about this with people, the biggest argument I get is, well, you'll have a bunch of substandard players who were above average coaches or above average GMs get in there. Well, right now you're having a player that was, to say the least, well above average, getting denied being in there, and I'm trying to see one good rational reason as to why. And this is before I'm even making the big compelling argument. If this were a court case, I'm basically doing the opening statement where I go talk to the jury and say my piece before I go sit down before the witness comes up. So at this point, I don't know what Brind'amour has to do to get in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I'm starting to wonder if he's ever going to get in there at all. This brings me to my next question. What is the current criteria? So before getting into the politics of how the selection committee makes their decisions, what numbers they're limited to, forgive my dog, he's back there playing with his little blanket. Before you get into all that type of stuff, let's just look at the player criteria alone. So even though he didn't have a million points, Rod Brind'amour made an amazing amount of contributions to the game as a player. The biggest reasons why players actually do off-ice training and really take care of themselves and have good nutrition nowadays is because of Rod Brind'amour. He's the one who really revolutionized the idea of will over skill, because once upon a time, you could smoke 2 packs a day, drink all the time, and make it into the NHL, like you kind of could with any other sport. But, you know, the days of Wayne Gretzky drinking Diet Coke on the bench are over. The days of Ali Afraidy going down the tunnel and having a cigarette are over. You take how players are conducting themselves and living their lives off the ice nowadays, where they're eating well, taking care of themselves, and working out off the ice and having to really push themselves to compete with each other. If you take Brind'amour out of that equation, none of that ever happens. So, if you want to look past his point totals, look past how many games he played, look past what he's done as a coach, one way he revolutionized the game was players started taking better care of themselves, and he was like the front runner for that. So, that's another thing. Rod Brind'amour's career started in 1989. He was one of the last players to be playing that started playing in the 80s, albeit right at the end. He also never spent a day in the minors, and the only team that he played for outside of the NHL was during the 04-05 lockout season. At the time of his retirement, he was 18th all-time in games played. He's one of only 5 players to win the Selke at least twice in a row. So I do frequently joke about this, where I say I'm waiting on the day that there's a late scratch, and Brind'amour tells Gleason and Daniels, hey, you guys are running behind the bench, and he comes out, he dresses, and he plays a game. And I'm kind of only half joking about that, because if there is one person behind the bench in this league who I think could actually lace up and go out there and keep up at least for a little bit, it's Rod Brind'amour. If there is one guy in this league who players look at and say, that guy has been here before and he's leading by example, it's Rod Brind'amour. As Jordan Martinook put it, they're willing to run through a wall for him. If there is one coach that players in that league look at, whether they play for him or not, and say, that guy might still be able to keep up, or that's who I want to learn from, it's Rod Brind'amour. But if there's one guy who continues to get denied entrance to the Hockey Hall of Fame that deserves it, it is Rod Brind'amour. So the Canes already had plenty of motivation to win a cup. Now they've got a little bit more. Because even if you don't get Rod into the Hall of Fame, you can get his name on the cup as a player and as a coach. And there ain't a whole lot of people who have done that. So, thank you very much for your time. If you like this video, please drop a like, share it, subscribe, leave comments. I'm starting to get some feedback now, and I'm really appreciating that. I'll try to respond to every single comment that I get. And y'all take care, and I will see you next time.